Hello my dear viewers, I would like to thank you for watching the video, and I wanted to say subscribe to my YouTube channel. I will be very grateful and you will not miss new videos. Enjoy the video. It started with a coffee. My name's Evelyn and I'm a junior editor at a small publishing house in Chicago. My days are mostly filled with manuscripts and emails, but my evenings are sacred. Just me, a cozy corner table at Blackbird Cafe, and my favorite caramel macchiato. One Thursday night, as I flipped through the latest novel submission, a man sat at the table next to mine. He was hard to miss, clean-cut, late 30s, with a confident smile that instantly drew attention. "You look serious," he said, nodding at my open laptop. I looked up, startled. "Oh, just work," I replied, forcing a polite smile. "Ah, a workaholic," he teased. "I'm Thomas, by the way." "Evelyn," I said cautiously, but something about his easy demeanor made me relax. We talked for a while about books, the weather, and even how Blackbird had the best coffee in the city. He was charming, attentive, and seemed genuinely interested in what I had to say. When he left, he smiled and said, "See you around, Evelyn." It felt harmless, but something about the way his smile lingered made me uneasy. Over the next week, Thomas kept showing up at Blackbird Cafe. Always around the same time, always sitting at the table next to mine. At first, it felt like a coincidence, but after the third or fourth time, it started to feel intentional. Not that I minded exactly. He was polite, charming, and seemed genuinely interested in me. But there were moments, subtle ones, where something about him felt off, like when I asked him what he did for a living. "I'm in security," he said one evening, swirling his coffee absent-mindedly. "What kind of security?" I pressed, curious. He smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "High-risk clients, sensitive situations. It's not as exciting as it sounds." The way he said it was casual, almost too casual, as if he was rehearsed. Later that night, as I walked home, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I turned around more than once, but the streets behind me were empty. It was probably nothing, I told myself. Just paranoia, but the feeling didn't go away. The next time I saw Thomas, I wasn't at the cafe. It was in the news. That morning started like any other. I was scrolling through my phone at the kitchen table, sipping coffee, when a headline caught my eye. "Woman found dead in Chicago River. Police suspect foul play." The article described a woman named Rachel Morgan, mid-30s, who had been reported missing 2 days ago. Her body had been found in the early hours of the morning, wrapped in plastic and weighed down with bricks. My stomach churned. It was horrible, but what really stopped me in my tracks was the location. Rachel had last been seen leaving a coffee shop, Blackbird Cafe, my cafe. I set my mug down, hands shaking as I scrolled further. That's when I saw it. A brief mention of a witness report. Someone had seen Rachel talking to a man shortly before she left the cafe. The description was vague but unsettlingly familiar. A tall, clean-cut man in his late 30s wearing a dark coat. Thomas, it had to be him. The thought sent a cold wave of nausea through me. I tried to tell myself it was just a coincidence. After all, how many men in Chicago fit that description, but the timing was too perfect. I remembered how Thomas had joked about being in security and how he always avoided giving too many details about his work. My mind raced as I pieced together the little things I'd noticed but ignored. The way he'd always shown up at the cafe at the same time as me, his ability to steer conversations away from himself, and the strange way he'd smiled when I first met him. I couldn't stop myself. I Googled his name. Nothing came up. Not a single result. A man as friendly and outgoing as Thomas should have some kind of online presence, a LinkedIn profile, a Facebook page, something. The fact that he didn't only made me more suspicious. By the time I arrived at the cafe that evening, my nerves were frayed. I wasn't sure if I was hoping to see him or praying he wouldn't show up. He did. Evelyn. His voice was as cheerful as ever as he slid into the chair across from me. "You're a hard woman to track down." "Busy week," I forced a smile, my heart pounding. "Yeah, something like that." We made small talk for a while, but I could barely focus. All I could think about was the article, the dead woman, and the way the witness had described him. Finally, I worked up the courage to ask, "Hey, Thomas, do you remember Rachel Morgan? She used to come here sometimes." He didn't miss a beat. "Rachel Morgan? Can't say I do. Should I?" His tone was casual, but his eyes were fixed on mine, sharp and unblinking. It was as if he was watching for a reaction. "No," I said quickly, shaking my head. "I just thought maybe you'd met her. She was on the news." He tilted his head, his smile never wavering. "Oh, I don't pay much attention to the news, to depressing." I felt like I couldn't breathe. That night, as I walked home, I couldn't stop glancing over my shoulder. The streets were quiet, but the silence felt heavy, like the city was holding its breath. When I finally got to my apartment, I locked the door behind me and leaned against it, trying to calm my racing heart. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from an unknown number. "You're asking the wrong questions. Evelyn, stop now." I stared at the text on my phone, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it might burst. My hands were trembling as I reread the message. "You're asking the wrong questions. Evelyn, stop now." I didn't recognize the number, but whoever it was, they knew my name and they knew I'd been asking about Rachel. I wanted to believe it was a prank, maybe a coincidence, but deep down, I knew better. I locked all my doors and windows, double-checking every latch, then sat on my couch, clutching my phone like a lifeline. My mind raced through possibilities. Was it Thomas, someone connected to him? Or was I just being paranoid? I decided to call my best friend, Jess. She picked up on the second ring. "Hey, what's up?" she asked, her voice light. "Jess, I think I'm in trouble," I blurted. There was a pause. "Evelyn, slow down. What happened?" I told her everything, the news article, my suspicions about Thomas, and the text. As I spoke, I realized how crazy it all sounded. But Jess didn't laugh or tell me I was overreacting. "That's terrifying," she said quietly. "Have you gone to the police?" "I don't have any proof," I said. "Just a gut feeling and a creepy text from an unknown number." "What are they supposed to do with that?" Jess hesitated. "You need to stay away from him, Evelyn. Block the number. Stop going to that cafe. And if anything else happens, anything, you call me first, okay?" I nodded, even though she couldn't see me, "Okay?" That night, I barely slept. Every creak and groan of the apartment building made me jump, and I kept imagining shadows moving outside my window. The next morning, I woke to another text from the same number. "You didn't listen. Meet me at Blackbird tonight. 8 p.m. Come alone." My stomach sank. The implication was clear: if I didn't show up, there would be consequences. All day, I couldn't focus. My thoughts kept circling back to the message. Meet me at Blackbird tonight. 8 p.m. Come alone. It wasn't a request, it was a threat. Just beg me not to go. It's obviously a setup, Evelyn. You don't know what this guy is capable of. I don't have a choice, I said, my voice shaky. If I don't show, who knows what he'll do. Jess wouldn't let it go. Then at least let me call the police. You don't have to face this alone. She was right. I hated the idea of involving them without solid proof, but I was out of options. I told her to call and share everything I told her, then hung up and started preparing for the night. By 7:45, I was sitting in my car outside Blackbird Cafe, my palms sweaty against the steering wheel. The cafe was dimly lit, and through the windows I could see a handful of patrons, none of them familiar, except him. Thomas sat at a corner table, stirring a cup of coffee like he didn't have a care in the world. His calm demeanor sent a fresh wave of dread through me. I got out of the car, my legs trembling as I crossed the street. I stepped inside, the bell above the door jingling softly. The warmth of the cafe was a stark contrast to the icy fear clawing at my chest. Thomas looked up and smiled. Evelyn, right on time. I forced a smile and sat across from him. You wanted to meet. Here I am. He leaned back, studying me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. I knew you'd come. You're too curious for your own good. What do you want, Thomas? I asked, keeping my voice steady. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached into his jacket pocket. My heart stopped as his hand emerged, holding a folded piece of paper. Read it, he said, sliding it across the table. I hesitated, but curiosity got the better of me. I unfolded the paper, and my blood ran cold. It was a photo of me walking to my apartment, sitting at the cafe, even through my living room window. You've been watching me, I whispered, my throat dry. Thomas smirked. It's my job to know my targets. Targets? My voice broke. What are you talking about? His expression turned cold. Someone hired me to kill you, Evelyn. But I declined the job. I stared at him, paralyzed with fear. Why are you telling me this? He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. Because now they're sending someone else, and I'm the only chance you've got to survive. His words hung in the air like a death sentence. Someone else, I repeated, my voice barely a whisper. Why would anyone want me dead? Thomas shrugged, his calm demeanor unshaken. I don't ask questions. I just complete the assignments, well, most of them. He sipped his coffee like we were discussing the weather. I felt lightheaded, my stomach twisting into knots. You said you declined. Why? Why are you helping me? Thomas studied me for a long moment, his gaze unreadable. I'm not a monster, Evelyn. I don't take contracts that don't feel justified. He smirked like the word was some kind of joke. And you're just an ordinary woman. Whoever wants you gone must have a reason, but it's not my problem anymore. His words felt like both a relief and a threat. I wasn't sure whether to thank him or run for my life. What do I do now? I asked, my voice cracking. He leaned back, his smile fading. You disappear. Change your name, your location, everything. Because the person they'll send next won't hesitate. And once you're in their sights, it's over. No, I said, shaking my head. I can't just leave my life behind. My friends, my job. Thomas cut me off, his tone sharp. If you want to stay alive, you'll do what I say. The weight of his words hit me like a freight train. He wasn't being dramatic, he was giving me my only option. But before I could respond, the cafe door opened and two men in suits walked in. Thomas's eyes flicked toward them, his body tensing. "Well," he muttered, "looks like we're out of time." I followed his gaze and my blood ran cold. The men weren't ordering coffee. They were scanning the room, their eyes landing on me. "Is it them?" I whispered, panic rising in my chest. Thomas nodded, standing casually. "Stay calm, follow my lead." Before I could say anything, he strode toward the men, his movements confident and deliberate. They barely reacted as he approached, but I caught the subtle exchange, a glance, a nod. Then, without warning, Thomas moved. He shoved the first man into a table, sending coffee and chairs flying. The second man reached into his jacket, but Thomas was faster. In one fluid motion, he disarmed him and knocked him unconscious with the butt of the gun. "Let's go," he barked, grabbing my arm and pulling me toward the back exit. We burst into the alley, the cold night air stinging my face. I could hear shouts behind us, but Thomas didn't stop. "Why are you doing this?" I yelled, struggling to keep up. He glanced back, his face grim. "Let's just say I don't like competition." We drove for hours, leaving the city behind. Thomas didn't explain where we were going, and I didn't ask. My mind was too busy reeling from everything that had happened. When he finally pulled over at a rundown motel in the middle of nowhere, he turned to me. "This is where we part ways." I stared at him, disbelief written all over my face. "That's it. You're just going to leave me here." "You'll be safe for now," he said. "I've bought you time, but it's up to you to stay off their radar." I wanted to scream at him, to demand answers, but I knew it was pointless. Thomas wasn't my savior. He was a killer who had spared me for reasons I might never understand. He handed me a burner phone and a small envelope of cash. "Don't call anyone you know. Don't go back to your old life. Trust me, Evelyn, if you do, they'll find you." And just like that, he was gone, disappearing into the night like a shadow. I stood there, clutching the phone and the cash, wondering if I'd ever feel safe again. Hello, my dear viewers. I would like to thank you for watching the video, and I wanted to say subscribe to my YouTube channel. I will be very grateful, and you will not miss new videos. Enjoy the video. My name is Josh Miller, and I've always thought of myself as a regular guy. I live in Chicago, I work in IT, and my life is about as exciting as a tax seminar. Or at least it wasn't until the day I found that apartment. It started on a Thursday. I just moved into a new place, a decent little studio on the edge of downtown. Nothing fancy, but it had a good view of the city, and for someone like me, that was enough. I was unpacking when I noticed something strange. The floor plan didn't match. Let me explain. When I first toured the place, the agent gave me a blueprint of the apartment. It was supposed to be straightforward, a single open room with a kitchenette and a tiny bathroom off to the side. But when I stood in the living room, something felt wrong. The wall across from me seemed closer than it should have been, like there was something behind it. I pulled out the blueprint and double-checked. Sure enough, there was supposed to be an extra 3 feet of space behind that wall. Maybe I was imagining things. Maybe it was just poor construction, but curiosity got the better of me, and I started knocking on the wall, looking for anything unusual. That's when I heard a hollow sound. I froze, my hand still pressed against the drywall. Hollow walls meant space, right? But there wasn't supposed to be anything back there. Grabbing a flashlight from one of the moving boxes, I crouched down and inspected the baseboard. That's when I noticed something odd. There was a tiny seam in the wall, barely visible unless you were looking for it. I pressed my fingers against it, and to my surprise, the panel popped open. Behind it was a narrow passage. It wasn't much, just a dark, cramped corridor that looked like it hadn't been touched in decades. The air smelled stale, like dust and mildew. I should have closed the panel and gone back to unpacking. But something about the passage called to me, like it was daring me to explore. I stepped inside, flashlight in hand, and started walking. The corridor was tight, the walls pressing in on either side. After a few feet, it opened into a small, windowless room. The first thing I noticed was the furniture. It was old, really old. A battered armchair sat in one corner, its fabric torn and stained. There was a wooden table with deep scratches across the surface and a rusted lamp that didn't look like it had worked in years. But what really caught my attention was the wall. It was covered in photographs, dozens of them, pinned up haphazardly. Some were black and white, others faded with age. They all showed the same thing: people. Random people walking through the city, sitting in cafes, standing at bus stops. And in every photo, their faces were crossed out with thick, red ink. My stomach churned as I scanned the wall, my flashlight trembling. These weren't just snapshots, they felt deliberate, like someone had been watching these people. In the center of the wall was a larger photo, framed and hung like a centerpiece. It was of a man, mid-30s, clean-shaven, wearing a suit and tie. His face wasn't crossed out like the others, but there was something unsettling about the way he looked at the camera, like he knew whoever was taking the picture. Beneath the frame was a single word scrawled in red ink, WHY. That was enough for me. I turned and bolted back through the passage, slamming the panel shut behind me. My heart was racing, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just walked into something I wasn't supposed to see. But as I stood there, trying to calm down, I heard it. A soft creak. It came from inside the passage. Someone or something was moving in there. I froze, my ear pressed against the wall, straining to hear. The creaking sound wasn't loud, but it was deliberate, slow, measured, like someone taking careful steps. I wanted to convince myself it was just my imagination. Maybe the building was old, the pipes shifting, or the walls settling. But deep down, I knew better. Someone or something was in that passage. I grabbed my phone and called the landlord. It went straight to voicemail. Figures. "Hi, this is Josh Miller in 3C, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I think there's something weird going on with the apartment. Can you call me back when you get this?" I hung up and stood there for a moment, debating what to do. I didn't hear the creaking anymore, but that didn't mean whoever or whatever it was had left. The rest of the night was a blur. I stayed in the living room, pacing back and forth, staring at the spot where the panel was hidden. I didn't sleep. I didn't even try. By morning, I'd convinced myself it was time to leave. Whatever this was, I didn't want any part of it. I started packing my things when my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. You shouldn't have opened it. I stared at the screen, my stomach churning. How did they have my number? My hand shook as I typed back, "Who is this?" No response. Instead, I heard a knock at the door. I approached cautiously, every nerve in my body screaming at me to run. But when I peeked through the peephole, I saw a man standing in the hallway. He was wearing a suit and tie, his face clean-shaven, his posture rigid. It was the man from the photograph. My breath caught in my throat. He didn't move, didn't knock again. He just stood there, staring straight ahead like he knew I was watching. I stepped back, my heart pounding. This wasn't possible. The photograph looked like it was decades old. How could he be standing here now? The knocking came again, louder this time. I backed away, clutching my phone, debating whether to call the police. But before I could dial, the knocking stopped. When I looked through the peephole again, he was gone. That evening, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The air in the apartment felt heavier, like the walls were closing in. I kept hearing faint sounds, creaks, whispers, the occasional soft thud, but every time I checked, there was nothing there. Then I heard the panel. It was a soft click, like someone opening it. My blood ran cold as I grabbed my flashlight and crept toward the wall. I pressed my ear against it, listening. Nothing. Slowly, I pushed the panel open, shining the flashlight inside. The passage was empty, just as dark and narrow as before. But when I stepped inside, I noticed something new, another photograph. It was pinned to the far wall where the furniture and other photos had been. This one was of me, taken from the passage. I was sitting on my couch, staring at the wall. The time stamp in the corner was from last night. Pinned beneath the photo was a note. "You're next." I don't think I've ever been as terrified as I was in that moment. Seeing myself in the photograph, proof that someone had been in my apartment watching me, made my stomach churn. I stumbled out of the passage, slamming the panel shut behind me. My hands were shaking so badly that I almost dropped the flashlight. I grabbed my phone and called 911. The operator's voice was calm, almost detached. 911, what's your emergency? There's someone in my apartment, I stammered. They've been inside. They've been watching me. Are they in the apartment now? I hesitated, glancing toward the panel. I don't know. The operator asked for my address and told me to stay on the line, but I couldn't. I hung up and grabbed my keys, ready to leave. But when I opened the door to the hallway, I froze. The man in the suit was standing there again. His expression was blank, almost bored, but his eyes locked onto mine as soon as the door opened. "You can't leave," he said. His voice was calm, matter-of-fact, like he was stating the weather. I didn't respond. I just slammed the door and locked it, my heart racing. I grabbed my backpack and stuffed it with whatever I could find: wallet, phone charger, a bottle of water. I didn't care about anything else. All I knew was that I had to get out of there. I ran to the window, my mind racing. I was on the 3rd floor, but maybe I could climb down somehow. Before I could decide, I heard it again, the creaking. This time, it wasn't coming from the panel. It was coming from inside the apartment. I turned slowly, my flashlight scanning the room. The shadows seemed deeper, darker, like they were alive. "Josh," a voice whispered. I whipped around, the beam of light catching the edge of the couch. No one was there. "Josh," the voice said again, closer this time. It wasn't the man in the suit. It was me. The voice was mine, but it was distorted, wrong, like hearing a recording played underwater. I backed toward the door, my breath coming in short gasps. The panel on the wall creaked open, and for a split second I saw something move inside. A shadow, tall and angular, just before the panel slammed shut again. I yanked the door open and ran. The hallway was empty. I bolted for the stairs, taking them two at a time. My only thought was to get as far away from that apartment as possible. When I reached the lobby, I saw the police officers talking to the landlord. Relief flooded through me as I rushed toward them. "You have to help me," I said, my voice shaking. "Someone's in my apartment. They've been following me." The landlord frowned. "Josh, what are you talking about?" I opened my mouth to respond, but one of the officers cut me off. "What apartment are you in?" 3C, I said. The landlord's frown deepened. 3C. "That's been empty for years." I froze. "What?" "No, I just moved in, a week ago." The landlord shook his head. "That apartment's been boarded up since the fire. No one's lived there since." His words cut off as the officers exchanged a look. "What fire?" I demanded. The landlord hesitated. "It happened 5 years ago. Some guy lived there, kept to himself, didn't talk to anyone. One day, there was smoke pouring out of the place. By the time the fire department got in, he was gone. Just disappeared." "What was his name?" I asked, my stomach twisting. The landlord hesitated again, then finally said, "Frank. Something. Frank Miller." My blood ran cold. Miller. That was my last name. My knees went weak. Miller. My last name? Was it a coincidence? It had to be, right? "No," I said, shaking my head. "That's not possible. I moved in last week. I've been staying there and packing, sleeping, everything." The landlord's expression darkened. "Josh, you've got the wrong apartment. 3C is sealed. It's been vacant since the fire." One of the officers stepped forward. "Sir, we'll go upstairs and take a look. Why don't you wait here?" "No," I said quickly. "I'm coming with you. You need to see it for yourself." We climbed the stairs together, my heart pounding louder with every step. When we reached the 3rd floor, I froze. The door to 3C was different. It wasn't the plain brown door I'd left behind. It was charred, blackened by fire, with a faint smell of smoke still clinging to it. Yellow caution tape crisscrossed the frame, brittle and faded. "This can't be right," I whispered. The officer nearest to me pulled out a flashlight and shone it at the door. "Sir, no one's been in here for years. It's condemned." I didn't believe him. I shoved past them, pushing the door open. It creaked loudly, the hinges stiff with rust. The air inside was thick and heavy, carrying the acrid smell of soot and decay. The apartment was nothing like I remembered. The walls were scorched, the furniture reduced to ash and twisted metal. The window I'd tried to climb out of was shattered, the glass still littering the floor. "This isn't real," I muttered, stepping inside. This isn't my apartment, but it was. In the corner, half buried in debris, was the panel I'd found. It was partially open, just as I'd left it. The officer followed my gaze, frowning. "What's that?" I didn't answer. I walked to the panel and pushed it open. The passage was still there, just as dark and narrow as before. "I told you," I said, my voice trembling. "There's something in here." The officer hesitated, then motioned for his partner to follow. "Stay behind us." We stepped into the passage, the beam of their flashlights cutting through the darkness. The walls felt closer than I remembered, the air colder. When we reached the end, the small room was just as I'd left it. The scratched table, the old chair, the photographs on the wall, everything was there. Except for one thing, the man in the suit was sitting in the chair. His face was shadowed, but I recognized him instantly. My breath caught in my throat as the officers froze, their flashlights fixed on him. "Sir, you need to stand up," one of them said, his voice steady but tense. The man didn't move. "Sir, I'm giving you one last chance," the officer warned. Still nothing. The second officer moved closer, reaching out to grab the man's shoulder. The moment he touched him, the lights went out. The darkness was absolute, swallowing everything. I couldn't see, couldn't hear anything except my own breathing, and then the voice came again. "You shouldn't have come back, Josh." It was him, the man in the suit, but it was also me. The sound of footsteps echoed around the room, circling me closer and closer. My chest tightened as panic took over. "Who are you?" I shouted into the void. His voice came from behind me, cold and steady. "I'm what you left behind." Suddenly, the lights flickered back on. The room was empty. The officers were gone. And the photographs on the wall, they were different. They all showed me. Dozens of pictures, taken at different points in my life, playing as a kid, sitting in class, walking to work. In the center was the same photograph I'd seen before, the man in the suit. Only now, his face wasn't blank, it was mine. Beneath it, written in red ink, was a single word: welcome. The screen fades to black as Josh's voice delivers the final line. Josh voiceover: "Some places don't just remember you. They hold on to you forever." Text appears on screen. The end. Hello my dear viewers, I would like to thank you for watching the video, and I wanted to say subscribe to my YouTube channel. I will be very grateful and you will not miss new videos. Enjoy the video. My name is Megan Harris. I'm 25 and I live in a small town in Pennsylvania, the kind of place where the highlight of the week is the Friday farmers market. Nothing exciting ever happens here, and I was fine with that. Until last month when everything changed. It was a Thursday morning, and I was heading out the door for work when I saw the package. It was sitting on my porch, small, unassuming, with no return address. At first, I didn't think much of it. Online shopping is basically a sport for me, and I've lost count of how many random packages I've ordered and forgotten about. But when I looked closer, I noticed something strange. The name on the label wasn't mine. It was addressed to A. Daniel Rhodes. There wasn't anyone named Daniel in my building, let alone on my street. Maybe it was a mistake, I thought. I'd just drop it off at the post office later. But as I picked it up, I felt something shift inside, a metallic clink, like keys or coins rattling together. My curiosity got the better of me. I brought it inside and set it on the kitchen counter. That's when I noticed the writing. Scrawled in shaky black marker across the side of the box were two words: "Do not." I sat there staring at it for what felt like forever. Do not what? Open it. Touch it. Was this someone's idea of a joke? My curiosity won out, like it always does. I grabbed a knife and sliced the tape. Inside, wrapped in crumpled newspaper, was a small black case. It was the kind you'd expect to find in a hardware store, plain, scuffed, and unremarkable. I unlatched it and opened the lid. Inside was a USB drive. That was it. No note, no explanation. Just a plain black USB drive resting in a foam insert, like it was something important. I turned it over in my hands, wondering what could possibly be on it. Photos, documents. Whatever it was, someone had gone through a lot of trouble to make sure it got to. Well, not me. I knew I shouldn't plug it in. But curiosity is a dangerous thing. I sat at my desk staring at the USB drive like it was some kind of ticking bomb. Part of me knew I should just leave it alone. Whatever was on there wasn't meant for me. But the other part of me, the curious, stubborn part, wouldn't let it go. I plugged it into my laptop. At first, nothing happened. The drive didn't auto-open, and no files appeared on my screen. I clicked into it manually, and there it was, a single folder labeled Watch Me. My stomach twisted as I clicked on it. Inside the folder was a single video file. No title, no description, just a timestamp, 1:1 for 2:11:17 p.m. I hesitated for a moment, then clicked play. The video started with shaky, grainy footage of a dimly lit living room. It looked normal enough: beige carpet, a couch, a coffee table with a half-empty mug on it. But something about the angle was unsettling. It was like the camera was hidden, filming from somewhere high up, maybe a shelf or a vent. A man walked into the frame, late 30s, scruffy beard, wearing a wrinkled flannel shirt. He looked exhausted, like he hadn't slept in days. He sat down on the couch, rubbing his hands over his face. For a long moment, nothing happened, and then he looked directly at the camera. "I don't know who you are," he said, his voice low and shaky. "But if you're watching this, I'm already dead." My breath caught in my throat. "I didn't mean for this to happen," he continued. "I thought I could handle it, but now they're after me. They'll be after you, too." The man reached for something off-screen and held it up, a black USB drive, identical to the one I'd found in the package. "They'll want this back. Don't let them have it." The screen flickered, the image distorting for a split second. When it came back, the man was gone. The camera still faced the living room, but now it was empty. And then the knocking started. It was faint at first, somewhere off-screen. The camera didn't move, but the sound grew louder, more frantic, until it echoed through the speakers. The video cut to black. I stared at the screen, my hands trembling. What had I just watched? Before I could process it, my phone buzzed. A text. It was from an unknown number. "Where is it?" My stomach dropped when I saw the text. "Where is it?" My hands shook as I typed back, "Who is this?" The response came instantly. "You have something that doesn't belong to you. Return it, and no one gets hurt." My breath caught in my throat. Whoever this was, they knew I had the USB drive. I thought about calling the police, but what would I even say? "Hi, someone sent me a creepy package and now I'm getting threatening texts." That wasn't going to cut it. Instead, I unplugged the USB drive, shoved it back into its case, and started pacing. My mind raced, replaying the man's words from the video. "They'll be after you, too." Who were they, and why did this drive matter so much? The buzzing sound of another text snapped me out of my thoughts. "Don't make this harder than it has to be." I swallowed hard, my chest tightening. Whoever this was, they weren't bluffing. And then I heard it. A knock at the front door. I froze, my pulse hammering in my ears. No one knocks at my door without calling first. Not my friends, not my neighbors, not even delivery drivers. I crept toward the peephole, my heart pounding. A man stood on the porch. Mid-30s, clean-cut, wearing a black jacket. He didn't look particularly threatening, but there was something off about the way he stood rigid, like he was forcing himself to stay calm. He knocked again, harder this time. "Miss Harris," he called out. His voice was smooth, almost polite. "We know you have the package. Open the door and we'll handle this quickly." I stepped back, my stomach churning. How did he know my name? Another knock, this one louder. "Megan," he said, his voice dropping. "If you don't open the door, we're coming in." I grabbed my phone and dialed 911, but the line wouldn't connect. No dial tone, no static, just silence, and then the back door creaked open. I spun around, my heart leaping into my throat. I'd locked that door, I was sure of it. Footsteps echoed from the kitchen, slow and deliberate. I didn't wait to see who it was. I grabbed the USB drive and bolted for the bedroom, locking the door behind me. My mind raced as I tried to figure out what to do. The only window in the room was too small to climb through, and there was no way I could fight off whoever was in the house. Then I remembered the video. The man had said they wanted the drive. That was all they cared about. I pulled it out of the case, my hands trembling, and stared at it. Was this thing really worth my life? A loud bang on the bedroom door made my decision for me. I stuffed the drive into my pocket, climbed onto the bed, and pushed open the attic access panel in the ceiling. I hoisted myself up just as the door burst open below. From the attic, I could hear them searching the room, their voices low and urgent. "She's not here," one of them said. "She has the drive," another replied. She couldn't have gone far. They were right. I couldn't stay up there forever, but I wasn't about to hand over the drive without answers. That's when I noticed it. The attic wasn't as empty as I thought. In the corner, buried beneath old insulation, was a box. A box identical to the one the USB drive had come in. I crawled toward the box, my breath shaky, ears straining to catch every sound from below. The men were still searching the house, their voices muffled and tense. My fingers brushed the dusty lid, and I pulled it toward me. It was identical to the first box, same size, same scuffed surface, even the same faint smell of must. Inside, wrapped in brittle newspaper, was another USB drive. My heart sank. How many of these were there? What could possibly be so important about them? Before I could think about it, a voice echoed from below. "She's in the attic." I froze, the sound of footsteps rushing toward the bedroom. They knew where I was. I had seconds to decide. Grabbing the new drive, I clambered toward the far end of the attic, where a small ventilation window faced the backyard. I shoved it open, the cool night air hitting my face as I pulled myself through. I dropped onto the grass below, landing hard, but adrenaline pushed me forward. I sprinted toward the tree line at the back of the yard, clutching both drives in my hand. Behind me, I heard the sound of the attic window creaking open. "She's outside," one of them shouted. I didn't stop. I ran into the woods, my legs burning, branches tearing at my skin. The sounds of pursuit grew fainter as I plunged deeper into the darkness. Eventually, I collapsed against a tree, gasping for breath. The drives were still in my hands, their hard edges digging into my palms. Once I was sure I hadn't been followed, I turned on my phone. The screen flickered to life, and to my surprise, I had service again. My first instinct was to call the police, but I stopped myself. What was I going to say? That strange man had broken into my house, chasing me over a USB drive. That I'd found a second one in my attic, Instead, I opened the browser and searched the one name I could think of, Daniel Rhodes. A few results popped up, mostly random social media profiles. But one link caught my eye, a news article from 3 months ago. The headline read, "Tech CEO found dead in apparent murder-suicide." I clicked on it, my stomach twisting. The article described Daniel Rhodes as the founder of a cybersecurity company. He'd been found dead in his home, along with his wife and young daughter. The police believed it was a murder-suicide, but some details didn't add up. One line jumped out at me. Investigators noted that a significant portion of Rhodes's personal files were missing, and his home computer had been wiped clean, the drives. It had to be connected. Whatever was on them, Daniel Rhodes had been killed for it. My phone buzzed. A text. This time it was from the same unknown number that had been messaging me all night. "You can't run forever, Megan." My hands shook as another message came through. "It's not just your life at stake," returned the drives. I stared at the screen, my mind racing. They knew my name, where I lived, and now they knew I had 2 drives. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed again. This time it was a video file. I hesitated, then pressed play. The video showed my parents. They were sitting at the dining room table, their faces pale and terrified. A man in a black jacket stood behind them, holding something just out of frame. "If you want them to live," the man said, his voice cold, "you'll bring the drives to the location we send you." The video cut off. My breath caught in my throat. This wasn't just about me anymore. I stared at the 2 drives in my hands, my mind spinning. Whatever secrets Daniel Rhodes had hidden on these drives, they were dangerous enough to kill for. And now I was holding them. I didn't know what to do, but one thing was clear. I couldn't trust anyone. The screen fades to black as Megan's voice delivers the final line. Megan voiceover, "Some secrets are too dangerous to keep and too deadly to let go." Hello my dear viewers, I would like to thank you for watching the video, and I wanted to say subscribe to my YouTube channel. I will be very grateful and you will not miss new videos. Enjoy the video. My name is Laura Mitchell. I live in a small town in Oregon, surrounded by dense forests and winding back roads. It's the kind of place where nothing much happens, and people like it that way. But last weekend, something did happen, something I still can't explain. It started when I took my dog, Scout, for a walk. There's a trail behind my house that winds through the woods, quiet and peaceful. It was late afternoon, the sun filtering through the trees, and I remember thinking how perfect the weather was. Scout was trotting ahead, his tail wagging, when he suddenly stopped. His ears perked up, and he let out a low growl. "What is it, boy?" I asked, glancing around. That's when I heard it, a voice. It was faint, coming from deeper in the woods, but clear enough to send a chill down my spine. It wasn't yelling or panicked, just calm and steady, repeating the same phrase over and over again. "Laura, come here." My heart skipped a beat. At first, I thought it was someone I knew, maybe a neighbor playing a prank, but the voice sounded wrong. It was too familiar. It sounded like me. I stood frozen on the trail, Scout growling low beside me. The voice continued, calm and steady. "Laura, come here." It wasn't just the tone that was off, it was the way it echoed, bouncing through the trees like it came from everywhere and nowhere at once. "Who's there?" I called, my voice shaking. The forest went silent. No birds, no wind, not even the sound of Scout's growls, just silence. I wanted to turn around and run, but something made me take a step forward instead. Scout barked, tugging at his leash like he wanted to go back. "Hello," I called again, taking another step. That's when I saw it. About 20 feet off the trail, tucked between the trees, was a small wooden structure. It wasn't much, just a crude shack made of mismatched boards, half hidden by overgrown brush. I'd walked this trail dozens of times and had never seen it before. Scout whined, his tail tucked between his legs. I knelt down, rubbing his head. "It's okay, boy, just a quick look." The voice came again, softer now. "Laura, come here." It was coming from the shack. Against every ounce of common sense I had, I stepped off the trail, pushing through the brush until I was standing in front of the shack. The door was slightly ajar, revealing nothing but darkness inside. "Hello," I called, my voice trembling. No response. I reached out and pushed the door open. It creaked loudly, the sound echoing through the quiet woods. Inside, the shack was empty. The floor was dirt, the walls lined with old, rusted tools. A broken chair sat in the corner, and a tattered blanket was crumpled in the middle of the floor. But there was no one there. I turned to leave, but something caught my eye. Scratched into the wood of the far wall, deep and jagged, were the words, "Not Laura." My stomach twisted. Before I could react, Scout barked furiously. I turned to see him staring into the woods, his fur bristling. And then I heard it, the voice again, louder this time. "Laura, come here." But it wasn't coming from the shack anymore. It was coming from the trail. I bolted out of the shack, Scout barking and straining at his leash. My heart was pounding as I stared back at the trail where the voice had come from. "Laura, come here." It was louder now, clear and unmistakable. It sounded just like me, but more distorted, like an old recording played through broken speakers. I couldn't see anyone. The trail was empty, stretching into the woods in both directions. Scout whimpered, pulling back toward the shack like he wanted to hide. I knelt beside him, whispering, "It's okay, boy. We're leaving." But as I turned to head back, the voice came again. "Laura, come here." This time, it was closer. My instincts screamed to run, but something about the voice rooted me to the spot. It was like hearing my own reflection, and the longer I listened, the more unsettling it became. I tightened my grip on Scout's leash and started walking back toward the trailhead, my steps quick and deliberate. The forest felt different now. The sun had dipped lower, casting long, jagged shadows across the path. Even Scout was acting strange, his ears flat against his head, his growls turning into soft, frightened whines. And then I saw it. Up ahead, partially hidden by the trees, was a figure. They were standing still, too far away to make out any details, but there was something disturbingly familiar about the way they stood. I stopped, gripping Scout's leash tighter. "Who are you?" I called, my voice shaking. The figure didn't move, but then they spoke. "Laura, come here." The voice was perfect. It wasn't just mimicking me, it was me. The cadence, the tone, even the hesitation in my words. My stomach churned as the figure stepped closer. Their movements were slow, deliberate, like they were testing each step. I backed away, panic rising. "Stay back," I shouted. The figure stopped. For a moment, the forest was deathly silent. And then they spoke again, softer this time. "Why are you running, Laura?" I didn't answer. I turned and ran. Scout and I tore down the trail, my breath ragged and my legs burning. I didn't dare look back, afraid of what I might see. The voice followed me, growing louder, more insistent. "Laura, come back." It was everywhere now, echoing through the woods from all directions. By the time I reached the trailhead, my lungs were on fire. I stumbled out of the woods, Scout at my side, and collapsed onto the gravel road. The voice stopped. The forest behind me was quiet again, as if nothing had happened. But when I turned back toward the trees, I froze. Standing at the edge of the trail was the figure. And this time I saw their face. It was mine. My heart stopped as I stared at the figure. They weren't just similar to me, they were identical. Same hair, same clothes, even the same small scar on my chin from when I fell off my bike as a kid. It was like looking into a living, breathing mirror. Scout barked furiously, pulling at his leash, but I couldn't move. My doubles stood at the edge of the trail, their expression blank, their eyes fixed on mine. They raised a hand, mimicking the exact motion I made when I reached for Scout. "Who are you?" I shouted, my voice cracking. The figure tilted their head, their lips curling into a faint smile. "Why are you running, Laura?" The voice wasn't distorted anymore. It was my voice, perfect and precise. I stumbled backward, clutching Scout's leash. "Stay away from me," but they didn't move. "You shouldn't have come here," they said, their tone soft, almost sympathetic. "You weren't supposed to see this." "See what?" I demanded. The figure's expression darkened, the echo. Before I could respond, they stepped forward. Their movements were smooth, deliberate, like they were in complete control. I backed away, my pulse racing. "What do you want from me?" The figure stopped, their eyes narrowing. "This isn't about what I want," they said. "It's about what you took." I froze. "What are you talking about? I didn't take anything." They tilted their head again, their smile returning. "You don't remember, do you?" I shook my head, my mind spinning. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Please, just leave me alone." The figure didn't respond. Instead, they pointed to the shack in the woods, their smile fading. "You should have stayed on the trail," they said. "Now it's too late." Without warning, Scout lunged forward, barking wildly. His sudden movement snapped me out of my daze, and I turned to run. I didn't stop until I reached my house, slamming the door behind me. My chest heaved as I locked every door and window, my hands trembling. Scout whined, circling nervously near the door. I dropped to my knees, hugging him tightly, but then I noticed something. The woods outside my window were still. I stared at the edge of the tree line, half expecting the figure to emerge. But there was nothing, no movement, no sound, just silence. And then, from somewhere inside the house, I heard it. My voice, "Laura, come here." I turned slowly, my heart pounding. The sound was coming from the hallway where the light flickered faintly. I grabbed a flashlight and crept toward the sound, my breath shallow. "Who's there?" I called, my voice shaking. No response. The voice came again, softer this time. "Laura, come here." I followed the sound to my bedroom, the door slightly ajar. I pushed it open, the flashlight trembling in my hand. The room was empty, but then I saw it. Scratched into the mirror above my dresser were two words, "Not Laura." Hello, my dear viewers. I would like to thank you for watching the video, and I wanted to say subscribe to my YouTube channel. I will be very grateful, and you will not miss new videos. Enjoy the video. My name is Kate Miller, and my life used to be simple. I worked as a nurse at the local hospital in Chicago, raised my son Eric on my own, and spent my free time reading or gardening. That was before last Tuesday, the day I found the bag. It started as a regular afternoon. I had a rare day off and decided to take a walk through Lincoln Park. The air was crisp and the autumn leaves crunched underfoot. I was nearing the south end of the park when I saw a black duffel bag lying just off the path, partially hidden by bushes. At first, I thought someone had lost their gym gear. But when I unzipped it, my breath caught. Stacks of cash, neatly bundled, each marked with a bright blue band. My first thought was to call the police, but then I hesitated. $3 million, there was no mistaking the amount. It wasn't the kind of money you stumbled upon by accident. I looked around. The park was quiet, no one in sight. My hands trembled as I zipped the bag back up. I should have walked away. I should have left it there and forgotten I ever saw it, but I didn't. I took it home. When I got home, I locked the doors, pulled the curtains shut, and set the duffel bag on my dining table. My hands trembled as I unzipped it again, the cash practically glowing under the dim light. $3 million. I didn't know what to do. If I turned it in, the police would ask questions I didn't have answers to. But if I kept it, I sat down, my head in my hands. Eric would be home soon. My son was a college sophomore, studying business. Smart, kind, and a little too good at keeping secrets. I hadn't told him about the money yet, and part of me wasn't sure I should. That night, strange things started happening. It began with a knock at the door around midnight. I froze, staring at the clock. No one visited at that hour, and the neighborhood was usually quiet. Slowly, I crept to the window, peeking out through the curtains. A black car idled across the street, its engine humming. The knock came again, louder this time. "Who is it?" I called, my voice trembling. Silence. I waited a moment, my heart racing, before daring to glance through the peephole. The porch was empty. The next morning, I found a note slipped under the door. It was written in blocky, uneven handwriting. "We know you have it. Return the bag or else." My stomach twisted. Whoever had left the money wasn't just looking for it, they knew I had it. I called Eric immediately, desperate for reassurance. "Sweetheart, I need to talk to you. Can you come home this weekend? Everything okay?" "Mom?" he asked. I hesitated, my eyes flicking to the duffel bag. "It's complicated. I just need to see you." "I'll be there Saturday," he promised. I hung up, feeling both relieved and terrified. But as I turned back to the table, my blood ran cold. The duffel bag was gone. I couldn't breathe. The duffel bag, $3 million, was gone. I searched the house, tearing through every room, but it was useless. The bag had been on the table minutes ago, and now it was just gone. The front door was still locked, the windows shut tight. Whoever had taken it hadn't left a trace. I sank onto the couch, my head spinning. What had I gotten myself into? And then my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. "You shouldn't have taken what's not yours." I stared at the screen, my hands trembling. Before I could respond, another text came through. "Meet us at the old warehouse on Brighton Avenue. Come alone." I knew the place. It was an abandoned shipping facility on the edge of town, a hot spot for shady deals and late-night fights. I had two choices: go to the warehouse and face whoever these people were, or call the police and risk dragging myself and Eric deeper into this mess. I arrived at the warehouse just after dusk, my heart pounding in my chest. The place was as eerie as I remembered, the building looming against the fading sky. Inside, the air was cold, heavy with the smell of rust and damp concrete. 3 men stood in the center of the room, their faces shadowed under dim overhead lights. One of them held the duffel bag, the black fabric clutched tightly in his gloved hand. "You're late," one of the men said, his voice sharp and clipped. "I don't know who you are or what you want," I said, my voice shaking. "I just found the bag. I didn't mean to take it." The man in the middle stepped forward, his expression cold. "Didn't mean to take it," he sneered. "You think we're stupid? You think we don't know exactly who you are." "What are you talking about?" I asked, my stomach twisting. He pulled something from his pocket and held it up, a photograph. It was a picture of Eric. My breath caught in my throat. What does my son have to do with this? The man's smile was cruel. Everything. The man tossed the photograph onto the floor at my feet. Eric's face stared back at me, smiling in his graduation cap. I picked it up, my hands trembling. "What do you mean Eric has something to do with this?" The man crossed his arms, his expression cold. "Your son owes us, big, and instead of paying his debt, he decided to run. Thought he could outsmart us. That's impossible," I said, shaking my head. "Eric's just a college student. He doesn't have anything to do with you." The man laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. "You really don't know your own kid, do you?" My chest tightened as he pulled a phone from his pocket. He tapped the screen a few times before turning it toward me. A video began to play. In the footage, Eric sat in a dimly lit room, a stack of cash in front of him. He was laughing, talking animatedly with another young man I didn't recognize. "Don't worry," Eric said, grinning. "It's a sure thing. The boss won't even know it's gone." The video cut off abruptly, leaving me staring at the screen in shock. "No," I whispered. He wouldn't. "Believe what you want," the man said, slipping the phone back into his pocket. "But your son stole from us, $3 million. And when he realized we were on to him, he dumped the bag and disappeared." "That's where you come in." I staggered back, my mind racing. Eric had always been secretive, but this... It didn't make sense. "You think I know where he is?" I asked, my voice shaking. "You're his mother," the man said, his tone icy. "If anyone knows, it's you, and if you're lying." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. I drove home in a daze, my mind replaying the video over and over again. Eric had always been a bright, ambitious kid. He'd worked hard to get into college, balancing classes with part-time jobs. How could he have gotten involved with people like this? When I walked through the door, I froze. Eric was sitting on the couch, his face pale, his hands clenched into fists. "Mom," he said, standing up quickly. "We need to talk, you think?" I snapped, my voice trembling with anger and fear. "Do you have any idea what kind of people are after us?" His eyes darted toward the window, his expression panicked. "Did they find you?" "Yes, they found me," I shouted. "They showed me a video of you." "Eric, what did you do?" He rubbed the back of his neck, his shoulders slumping. "I thought I could fix it," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't mean for it to go this far." "You stole $3 million, I said, my voice breaking. "How could you even think?" "I didn't have a choice," he snapped, his voice rising. "I owed them money. A lot of money." They said I could work it off, but then they kept raising the stakes. I wanted out. My heart sank as the full weight of his words hit me. My son, the boy I'd raised to be honest and hard-working, had gotten himself into something I couldn't protect him from. You have to fix this, I said, gripping his shoulders. You have to give them back what they want. He shook his head. It's not that simple. Once you're in, you're in. They're not going to let me walk away. A loud knock at the door made us both jump. They're here, Eric whispered, his face pale. The knock came again, louder this time. Eric grabbed my arm, pulling me toward the kitchen. We have to get out of here, he whispered urgently. Eric, stop. I yanked my arm free, my heart pounding. We can't just keep running. They won't stop until they find you. Then what do you want me to do? He snapped, his voice breaking. Hand myself over, they'll kill me, Mom. The fear in his eyes made my chest ache, but I couldn't let him see my doubt. Let me handle this, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Before he could argue, I walked to the door. My hands trembled as I unlocked it, bracing myself for what I'd find on the other side. The man from the warehouse stood there, flanked by two others. His expression was cold, his eyes scanning the room before landing on Eric, who had frozen in the doorway to the kitchen. Good, the man said, a cruel smile tugging at his lips. I see you've saved us the trouble of finding him. Wait, I said quickly, stepping between them. You don't need to hurt him. He'll give you the money back. The man raised an eyebrow, clearly amused. The money, he said, gesturing to the duffel bag one of his men carried. We already have it. My stomach dropped. Then what do you want? An example, he said simply, his smile fading. People need to know what happens when you cross us. He nodded to the man beside him, who pulled out a gun and took a step forward. No, I shouted, panic gripping me. Wait. There has to be another way. The man lowered the gun slightly, tilting his head. What are you offering? I hesitated, the words catching in my throat. But as I looked back at Eric, terrified, shaking, still so young, I knew there was only one choice. Take me instead, I said, my voice trembling. I'll do whatever you want. Just let him go. Eric's eyes widened. Mom, no. Shut up, Eric. I snapped, tears streaming down my face. You did this, now let me fix it. The man studied me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he laughed, a low, humorless sound. Brave, he said. Stupid, but brave. He motioned for his men to stand down. Fine, he said. You'll work for us, but if your boy screws up again. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. They left as quickly as they'd come, taking the bag and my freedom with them. Eric collapsed onto the couch, his head in his hands. Mom, I'm so sorry, he whispered. I sat beside him, pulling him into a hug. We'll get through this, I said, though I didn't believe it. My life wasn't mine anymore. I'd made a deal with the devil to save my son, and now I had to live with it. Hello my dear viewers, I would like to thank you for watching the video, and I wanted to say subscribe to my YouTube channel. I will be very grateful and you will not miss new videos. Enjoy the video. My name is Alex Hayes. I live in a quiet town called Greenridge. Nothing much happens here. It's one of those places where everyone waves at each other but never really knows anyone. Perfectly peaceful, perfectly boring, or at least that's what I thought. This started 3 weeks ago. It was a Saturday night, and I was home alone. My roommate, Josh, was out of town visiting his folks, so I had the house to myself. I remember that night vividly. I was on the couch, half asleep, with an old horror movie playing in the background. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows, and the occasional creak of the floorboards kept me on edge. Classic creepy vibes, right? But I was used to it. Then the phone rang. Not my cellar old landline, the one we barely ever use. Honestly, I'd forgotten we even had it. The sound jolted me upright. I stared at the phone on the wall, its shrill ring cutting through the silence. Who uses landlines anymore? My first instinct was to ignore it, but something about the timing, almost midnight, made me uneasy. I got up and answered, "Hello." At first, all I heard was static, faint and crackling like an old radio station just out of range. I was about to hang up when I heard a voice, a low whisper that sent chills down my spine. "Do you know what he did?" "Excuse me," I stammered. My heart was racing now. The voice didn't respond, just more static. Then the line went dead. I hung up and stood there for a moment, staring at the phone. Maybe it was a prank call. Kids messing around. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. That voice, it sounded off. Not robotic, not computerized, just off, like it didn't belong. I tried to brush it off, but I couldn't shake the unease. I double-checked the locks on the doors and windows, made sure the house was secure, and crawled into bed, but sleep didn't come easy. Every little noise, the creak of the stairs, the groan of the wind, felt amplified, like something or someone was just outside, waiting. And then, at 3:14 a.m., the phone rang again. I froze, staring at the glowing numbers on the bedside clock. 3:14 a.m. That wasn't a time for casual calls. The landline rang again, sharp and insistent. My heart pounded in my chest. I thought about ignoring it, pretending I didn't hear. But what if it was important? What if something had happened to Josh? That thought pulled me out of bed, each step toward the phone feeling heavier than the last. I picked up the receiver, my voice shaky. "Hello." Static. At first, it was just like before, crackling, faint, almost hypnotic. But then, that same voice came through, clearer this time. "You don't know what he did." "But I do." "Who is this?" I demanded. My voice cracked. "If this is some kind of joke, it's not funny." The voice ignored me, almost like it hadn't heard. "You're not safe, Alex. He's coming." Click. The line went dead again. I stood there, gripping the receiver so tightly my knuckles turned white. My head was spinning. Who was he, and why was I not safe? My first thought was to call the police, but what would I even tell them? Some creepy voice on a landline said I wasn't safe. Yeah, that'd go over well. Instead, I did the next logical thing. I called Josh. The phone rang twice before he picked up, groggy and confused. "Alex, what's going on? It's the middle of the night. There's someone calling the house. They keep saying weird things about not being safe, about someone coming." "Do you know anything about this?" I was rambling, panic creeping into my voice. Josh was quiet for a moment. "That doesn't make any sense. Who even has our landline number?" That question hit me like a punch to the gut. He was right. We never used that number. Never gave it out? "I don't know," I admitted, pacing the room now. "But something's not right." Josh sighed. "Look, it's probably some kind of prank. Lock the doors, keep your phone nearby, and get some sleep. I'll be back tomorrow, okay?" I didn't like it, but what else could I do? Yeah, okay, I lied. After hanging up, I couldn't bring myself to go back to bed. I grabbed a kitchen knife, not exactly comforting, but it was better than nothing, and sat in the living room with all the lights on. The hours dragged by. Around 5 a.m., just as the sky was starting to lighten, I heard it. A faint thud from the back of the house. My stomach dropped. I crept toward the noise, knife in hand, every step feeling like it took an eternity. The sound came again, louder this time, a deliberate, almost rhythmic pounding on the back door. When I reached the kitchen, I stopped, staring at the door. The frosted glass pane revealed a shadowy figure on the other side and moving except for the slow, methodical knocking. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice trembling. No answer, just the knocking, louder now. I tightened my grip on the knife, every nerve in my body screaming to run, to hide. But before I could do anything, the knocking stopped, then the landline rang. The landline's shrill ring cut through the silence, freezing me in place. My eyes darted between the phone on the wall and the shadow outside the door. I didn't want to answer, but I couldn't just ignore it either. My gut told me it was connected, that the voice and the figure outside weren't coincidences. The knocking had stopped, but the shadow remained. It was unnervingly still, like whoever or whatever it was waiting for me to make the next move. Finally, with trembling hands, I picked up the receiver. "What do you want?" I demanded, my voice cracking. This time, the voice didn't whisper. It spoke clearly, deliberately. "Don't open the door, Alex." My breath caught in my throat. "What are you talking about? Who are you? Don't open it." "He's not who you think he is." Click. The line went dead. I slammed the receiver down and backed away, my eyes glued to the door. The shadow was still there, motionless. My chest felt tight, my breathing shallow. I didn't know what to believe. Was this some elaborate prank? Was someone trying to mess with me, or was I in real danger? The silence was suffocating. I needed to do something, anything, to break it. I grabbed my cell phone and dialed 911, my hands shaking so badly I almost dropped it. 911, what's your emergency? "There's someone outside my house," I blurted. "They've been knocking on the door and I think they're trying to get in. They won't say who they are. Are they still there?" The operator asked, her voice calm but firm. I glanced at the door. The shadow was gone. My heart sank. "They were," I whispered. "But now they're not." "Stay on the line with me," the operator instructed. "Officers are on their way." "Is there a safe place in your house where you can go?" I nodded, then realized she couldn't see me. "Yeah," I muttered. "I'll go to my room." I hurried upstairs, clutching the knife so tightly my hand ached. The operator stayed on the line, asking questions I barely registered. Was the house locked? Did I see any vehicles outside? I answered automatically, my mind racing. When I reached my room, I locked the door and sat on the bed, staring at the hallway through the crack under the door. I couldn't see anything, but I felt that heavy, oppressive feeling of being watched. And then I heard it, a creak on the stairs. "Someone's in the house," I whispered into the phone. The operator's tone shifted, more urgent now. "Stay where you are. Officers are almost there. Do not engage with them." The creaking grew louder, closer. Whoever it was, they were moving slowly, deliberately. My grip on the knife tightened. I held my breath, listening. The footsteps stopped outside my bedroom door. And then a voice I knew all too well called out, "Alex, it's me, Josh. Open the door." "Josh," I croaked, my voice barely above a whisper. My brain struggled to process what I was hearing. Josh wasn't supposed to be back until later that day. He couldn't be here. "Yeah, it's me," the voice said again. "Come on, Alex, open the door. I forgot my keys." The words were casual, but something about his tone was wrong. It lacked the usual warmth, the easygoing nature I knew so well. I tightened my grip on the phone. "How did you get in?" There was a pause, just long enough to make my skin crawl. "The back door," Josh replied. "It was unlocked." That was a lie. I had checked every lock before I sat down in the living room. "I don't believe you," I said, my voice trembling. Another pause. Then the voice changed, still Josh's, but colder, almost mocking. "Don't be like this, Alex. Open the door. We need to talk." I pressed the phone to my ear, desperate for reassurance. "He's at my door," I whispered to the operator. "He says he's my roommate, but something's not right. Please, hurry. They're less than 2 minutes away," she promised. "Stay on the line, don't open the door." The knob jiggled, my heart leapt into my throat. "Alex," the voice said again, louder now. "You're freaking out over nothing, just open the door." I backed further into the room, shaking my head even though he couldn't see me. This wasn't Josh, it couldn't be. But whoever it was, they knew how to sound just like him, Alex. The voice bellowed, the calm veneer cracking into frustration. The door shook violently as he pounded on it. I said, "Open the door." I flinched, every instinct screaming at me to run, to hide, to do anything but stand there frozen in fear. And then, as suddenly as it started, the pounding stopped, silence, the crack under the door showed nothing but darkness. I strained to listen, but all I could hear was my own rapid breathing. "Are you still there?" the operator asked, her voice grounding me. "Yeah," I whispered. He stopped. "I think he—" A loud crash downstairs cut me off. The sound of splintering wood echoed through the house, followed by heavy footsteps. Whoever was at my door wasn't waiting anymore. "They're inside," I hissed into the phone. "Stay where you are," the operator said, her voice urgent. "Officers are seconds away." I backed into the corner of the room, the knife shaking in my hand. My eyes darted between the door and the single window, calculating if I could climb out. Before I could decide, I heard another voice, this one amplified and commanding, Greenridge Police. "Come out with your hands up." Relief flooded me. The footsteps downstairs stopped abruptly. The tension in the air was palpable, like the entire house was holding its breath. Then the pounding returned, this time on the front door. "Police," the voice barked. "Open the door." The house went deathly silent. Whoever was inside wasn't moving anymore. I stayed where I was, clutching the phone like a lifeline. And then I heard it. A low, chilling laugh, so close it felt like it was coming from inside the room. The laugh froze me in place. It wasn't loud, but it was unmistakably close inside the room with me. My breath caught in my throat as I whipped my head around, knife raised, scanning the dim corners of the room. It was empty. At least, that's what I thought. The police were shouting downstairs, their commands echoing through the house, but I couldn't focus on them. My entire body was locked in fight-or-flight mode, every nerve on edge. Slowly, I edged toward the window, my eyes darting to every shadow. and then I saw it, a shape in the corner, hunched and barely distinguishable from the darkness. My heart stopped. It hadn't been there before. Alex. The voice was low, guttural, and unmistakably Josh's, but this wasn't him. I knew it. I didn't wait to find out what it wanted. I bolted for the window, throwing it open and scrambling out onto the roof. The icy night air hit me like a slap, but I didn't care. I was halfway across the roof when I heard the door to my bedroom burst open behind me. "Get back here," the voice bellowed, deeper and more distorted now. I didn't look back. I couldn't. The sound of heavy footsteps on the roof chased me as I slid down to the edge, barely catching myself before I fell. I hung there for a second, feet dangling, before I dropped to the ground with a painful thud. Blue and red lights flashed across the yard. I stumbled toward the officers, shouting incoherently. They rushed toward me, guns drawn, shouting commands I couldn't process. "He's in there," I finally managed to scream. "He's inside." The officers stormed the house, their shouts and the crackle of their radios blending into chaos. I collapsed onto the lawn, gasping for air, clutching my side where I'd landed hard. Minutes felt like hours as I sat there, staring at the front door. Finally, the officers emerged, but they weren't dragging anyone out. "There's no one inside," one of them said, his brow furrowed. "We searched the entire house." "That's impossible," I shouted, scrambling to my feet. He was in my room. He was right there. The officer exchanged a glance with his partner, then looked back at me. "Are you sure, sir? We found no signs of forced entry. Just you. And this." He held up something in a plastic evidence bag. My stomach churned as I recognized it immediately. The landline phone, its receiver dangling by the cord. "No," I whispered. "That doesn't make sense. I talked to someone on that phone twice." "We checked the line," the officer said, his tone careful. "It hasn't been connected for months.